In the last few years, there have been a lot of changes in the way education is conducted around the world. One of the biggest innovations or developments is the development of the information technology that has changed the world, changed so many things. Now, the question for us is, in Nigeria, how are we coping with these changes that have taken place? And how are these changes impacting on our education and our young people, especially now that we have uh, artificial intelligence, which is taking storm around the world? With me to discuss the developments in this sphere is a technologist, Dr. Ya'u Zakari, former lecturer at the Bayero University, Kano, a former student activist and the chief executive officer of the CITAD. Wisely, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, let me ask you a straightforward question for us to start. How do you think the Nigerian educational system will cope with the fast-paced development in information technology?
I think this is a very loaded question because clearly the Nigerian education system is unprepared for the changes that are taking place. You can think about preparation when you have the infrastructure, when you have the personnel, manpower, the resource persons. But what is happening in Nigeria is that our universities are under-equipped, under-resourced, lacking the necessary infrastructure for the uptake of technology in education. That is not to say that there is nothing that is happening at the moment. Many universities of technology in teaching, in research. However, the sheer size of the student population outpaces the available infrastructure that is on the ground in most of these universities. Many universities are planning on how they can migrate to online educational services, allow students to write exam online, facilitating exchange between lecturers and students online. But some of the lecturers also are not yet prepared for this. They lack the skills, they lack the access. Now, I think that one of the fundamental things that needs to be done is that our universities have to sit down and this develops both policies and strategies on how they can leverage technology in transforming our educational system. Now, policy is very critical because you will find right now, when there is no policy, lecturers will say, I don't want students to use artificial intelligence in terms of essay writing or in research. Another lecturer would allow it. I have had the funny experience 3 or so years, I was doing a research on the use of technology by people who are living with disabilities, that's PWDs. I was talking to universities whether there's classrooms where IT compliant for people living with disabilities. And one of the shocking experiences I received was that the blind student went to the class, and the student with the hearing impairment, they can't see the board, so they have to record the lectures in voice. And this student had gone into the classroom recording the lecturer or recording the lectures, let me see. And the lecturer just saw that this student was recording him, and he asked the student to get out. Why would he be recorded? And the student said, well, this is the only way I can assess this lecture. The lecturer wasn't ready, so he sent him out. It took quite a intervention to bring to the notice of the lecturer that a blind student cannot see whatever illustration he was making on the board, and therefore he needed to record that lectures and be able to retrieve it at home in the hostel, wherever, and be able to listen to it again and interact with it. So that's and score the importance of having a policy on the use of technology in our education system. And so the second
Now,
stage is that
before
then
before you
what
go on, let me ask you this question. What really is the level of penetration? Because universities are complaining about basic things like even light. So what is the level of penetration of the facilities? I mean, in terms of connectivity in the universities?
I think it's generally poor. Um, I think by now we ought to have wireless hotspots everywhere on our campuses and particularly in all classrooms. That is not happening. Perhaps in some specialized places, locations within the campus, you could get hotspots. But by and large, penetration is very low. You would hear that universities are planning will provide hotspots in the hostel, which is recommendable. But you go there, there's no wireless for students. But more importantly, you can't talk about technology when you have no power. ABU closed for almost 9 months because there was no electricity. BUK had this massive solar power station. And 2 days ago, I was in Abuja in a conference, and the managing director of Rural Electrification Agency made a presentation on these initiatives, what they are doing. And he cited BUK as one of the examples that they have deployed this massive thing, and that because they were not prepared in terms of power conversion, the thing was not working. And so there is actually no electricity coming from that power supply. So for most of the days, campuses are in darkness, and you can't have technology without power supply. So to be specific about your question, one, the penetration, I have no empirical data, but from my own observations, very low for 21st century university. And secondly, even in that context of an inadequate penetration, you do not have the necessary energy to enable the usage of those facilities.
From your interactions, which I know you've been doing with several people in the African continent, how does Nigeria compare with other countries in Africa in this respect?
I think Nigeria compares poorly with South Africa, for instance, or even Ghana. In South Africa, students are using AI in classrooms and in generating writing assignments and so forth. Here, lecturers are worried whether these are a legitimate thing to do. Many lecturers do not even understand basic plagiarism checker, you know, which would allow you to know whether a student copied things, plagiarized, or it was machine generated content, you know. So we are really far at the bottom compared to many African countries. And when I say many African countries, I mean countries like Kenya, like Egypt, like Senegal, like Ghana. Perhaps we would compare favorably, maybe with Burkina Faso, Niger Republic,
Well, it's not a laughing matter anyway, but it tells a lot. But when you say that lecturers don't even understand, a lot of lecturers don't understand the artificial intelligence, what will you have the universities do? Or in terms of policy, what is the missing link?
well, first of all, you see, in the last 3 years, the trend that is happening is that the many universities are moving away from essay examinations to multiple choice, even in political science, in English, and so forth. You know, and I think that has a challenge. I mean, is a response to the fact that you have a huge class size, you can't read the scripts, and you don't have the necessary technology to assist you to do that. Not that that technology is not available, but our universities are not yet ready for that. Now, what that means is that the critical thinking would be lacking. I mean, you just ask a student in the final year political science, select A, B, C, D. When you want him to articulate, to analyze issues, and you're reducing him to just simply between the ticking what is the meaning of democracy or what is post-structuralism and so forth. I think that we need to do a lot of hard thinking. Our university administrators, unfortunately, are not administrators of academic institutions. They are administrators of, establishment to provide the contract for these colleagues and so forth. I think that first, they need to sit down, think, and develop policies. Second, they need to build capacity of their own manpower, their own lecturers, their own academics. And thirdly, needs to do an audit of what are the facilities they have, what are the infrastructure, where are the gaps, and what needs to be done in order to address those gaps. Now, until you do this, do not think Nigerian universities would be in the position that we said they are ready to embrace technology. Because to embrace technology means that you have done a conscious decision of what you would use this technology for, how you are going to use it, and more importantly, how you are going to procure and maintain that technology. Now, if REA, Rural Electricity Agency, brings power supply, brings solar panels, and the university is not able to maintain, then it's a problem. It means it's not yet ready. I was made a joke, but it wasn't really a joke. When the fellow finished his presentation, I happened to be the first person to ask question. I said, well, just before I ask my substantive question, let me say, I heard that my university couldn't maintain these facilities that you put in. But I see that you are my students in that agency. What does that tell me? Is it that the students we produce are now better than the some teachers, or is it that something has happened? Of course, he had no reply to that, but it tells you a story that we have no capacity to maintain technology itself. So even if you put it there, the chances are that within a few days, a month, a year would fail to function, and nobody would be there to maintain it.
I do know that in terms of technology, people resist the adoption of technology. So in this case, is it a question of resistance to change management? Is it problem of change management, or is a problem that people don't actually have the capacity, are not willing to do what is needful?
I think it's a combination. You have people who would resist technology, resist change. But I think in this context, everybody is using the cell phone. So if they were not resisting using cell phone, I'm sure then it's not fundamental resistance. In earlier days, I know that there was huge resistance. I know professors who tell this to postgraduate students, don't touch internet for any research you are doing. But I think there's one, the fact that our governments, I say government because universities are owned by both federal and state governments, they are not ready to, provide the necessary funding to have our universities procure the necessary technology that will transform them. Many state governments are prepared to send students to India, Pakistan, Germany, or wherever, when they have their own state university and when those funds can be used to upgrade their own universities and to do much more better than they are doing. Second, I think that this the mindset. People need to understand what technology can do for you in order to embrace it. And I think that many of our academics are lacking that understanding about what technology can do for them. What are the potentials, of transforming learning processes using the technology. Now, this is not the institutional problem per se. I think that it's the way in which academics, a number of them have found themselves. They brought in from the analog tradition, and they think that there's only one tradition. And so they stick to that. They need to, consciously transform this mindset that technology would make life easier for them, make life easier for the students, or make life easier for the county. So there are lots of factors responsible for this. But if I should single the most important one, it's really, you see, in technology, they say there are the 4 A's. You talked about the availability, the affordability, access, and so awareness is poor in our context, and it's foundational. If you are not aware, you just can't make effort. Once awareness is there, then you think about access. Would I be able to access this technology? Would I be able to get it and use it? Access is still poor. Then you talked about affordability, which is absolutely for most universities because they can't afford it. They can't afford bandwidth. They can't afford systems.
Thank you very much. In the last few minutes, we've been speaking with YZ, popularly known YZ. We've been talking about education and technology. Thank you once again for agreeing to be on our program.